Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. My name is AJ, and I'm going to be talking about a few things that's happening today. So the first thing is the siege of Mariupol is finally over, and it's probably the right thing to do. All of the Az0v militants seem to have surrendered, probably run out of food or ammunition or both, but it is the right thing to do. It saved lives on both sides. And there's no point needlessly killing yourself for Zelensky. So I hope the rest of Ukraine takes note and probably does the same, and hopefully they can come to agreement very soon. So we'll see what happens. So the next story is Ukraine warns of draconian measures to support crashing economy. So they're saying that Ukraine's economy will probably last another month or two. They really need that 40 billion from America to come soon as possible. If it doesn't come through over the next few weeks, or if it doesn't get approved, you can see Ukraine's economy crashing. And if Ukraine's economy crashes, they can't pay for their army. They can't pay for anything. They've got no oil and gas in that country. They can't fight a war with Russia with no oil and gas, no money to pay the army, no money to keep the country going. And what they're saying is they're going to have huge tax hikes, and they're going to nationalize a lot of the businesses. If I can tell you right now that if they start doing huge tax hikes, people are going to leave Ukraine even more. You will see millions more, even millions and millions more Ukrainians just leaving the country. They're not going to sit there and expect to pay huge taxes to Ukraine, paying Zelensky and paying the Azovs. They're not going to have that. They're going to start heading for the borders, and you will see millions more going into Europe, these refugees, and Europe won't be able to handle it. So this 40 billion from America needs to come soon and fast, and if it doesn't, then you will see this happening to Ukraine. And this 40 billion is not going to save Ukraine, by the way. That will probably last them 3 months at the most, because it's a very, very expensive war. Most of that money will go into weapons, but also, Ukraine has no fuel. Ukraine, they'll need to pay for fuel. They need to find ways to transport all these weapons to the front lines. I just don't see why people still think Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is not winning. Anyone with a brain would see that Ukraine is losing, and it's losing badly. There's going to come a time when they're going to start reading the news, and they're going to be articles such as, "Oh, Ukraine is winning, Russia is losing," and then suddenly Ukraine basically surrenders, saying, "All right, you know what? We completely surrender. We just can't run the country. We'll completely give in to Russian demands." The same thing happened with Afghanistan, and you had a lot of people going along with Biden. You had British papers as well talking about it. Nobody believes the West anymore. Nobody believes these Western papers anymore. The real life situation happening in Ukraine is suffering. Ukraine is losing battalions, 500 to 1,000 people per day. Per day they're losing. I'm not just talking about deaths. I'm talking about people surrendering, people going out of action because of injury. Thousands they are losing per day. And don't forget the economic cost as well. The damages to the infrastructure, and the loss of oil and gas, and loss of businesses, the loss of tax because people are moving out of the country. Ukraine is being destroyed, in every sense possible, militarily, economically. There is no way Ukraine will survive after this. No way. So there's a story about the G7. G7 basically had a meeting recently, and they put out a joint statement. And in that joint statement, again, they were China bashing. So instead of talking about Russia or Ukraine, their focus was on China, and absolutely been China bashing during that press conference. And China pretty much said, "Look, mind your own business." The G7 is a bunch of useless countries who can't even run an economy at the moment. I mean, every single country in the G7 is having economic issues, high inflation, high food costs, high tax, high gas prices, led by the cronies of America. You have all of these other countries in the G7 who are not even that powerful, by the way, because you have countries like Italy in there, and other small countries like even Canada's in there, who doesn't have a good economy as well. Great Britain, which is on its way down severely. You have these old ex-colonial countries joining up as the G7, thinking that they own the world, they can dictate whatever the world does, make rules for the world, tell countries bigger than the G7 like China and Russia, tell them what to do. And they basically came up with a big laundry basket of items. And they're talking about again, China not to help Russia, and then they started talking about human rights as well. They had a big, massive laundry basket of items. I'm thinking, what the hell is that for? So let me see what they have said. So you can see here, the countries US, Germany, Italy, Canada, UK, France, and Japan, who are basically the West, the collective West, issued a statement on Saturday calling on Beijing to resolutely urge Russia to stop the war in Ukraine. So why do they want Beijing to stop the war in Ukraine when Ukraine is winning, right? So if Ukraine is winning and Russia is losing, why do they want China to stop the war? It's absolutely hypocritical, it's absolutely ridiculous. These guys have no clue whatsoever. And he says, and refrain from providing economic and military assistance to the Kremlin. The group also insisted China support the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine and urge Russia to stop its military aggression against Ukraine. But that's not it. That's not it as well. So they carried on. The G7 also expressed concerns on China's involvement in around East and South China Seas, advising Beijing to avoid threats, coercion, intimidation measures, and the use of force, demanding that China grant impartial monitors to access Xinjiang and Tibet. The group also called for peace and stability in the Taiwan region and expressed support for Taiwan's participation in the World Health Assembly and WHO technical meetings. I mean, seriously, I mean, this is like a big laundry basket of items. You gotta do this, you must do this, you must do that, you must do this. I mean, who do they think they are actually talking to? You know, China is not the same China in the 1940s or the 1950s where you can push around. Even then, you know, the West couldn't push them around. And now, they still think they can demand, you know, laundry basket items of China, and China will just sit back and say, yeah, sure, whatever you say, yeah, whatever, yeah, of course, I'll do whatever you say. They still have not cleared their mess up in Ukraine, and they're already picking on their next target, which is China. And absolute hypocrites. The G7 countries, I mean, they need to disband this group of gangsters, to be honest. It's an absolute waste of time. I remember when the G7 came to UK and Boris was holding it in Cornwall, and this was during pandemic times, and nobody came in, you know, all of these G7 members came in with private flights. None of them had any masks on. They were not even social distancing, and the amount of money they spent on the G7 in the UK, they had a huge cruise ship full of police, and they basically locked down the whole Cornwall island. It cost them billions and billions. And then after they left, the Cornwall had a huge influx of coronavirus issues because people were not social distancing, and none of them went through any lockdowns. You know, the rule was whenever somebody goes abroad or somebody comes into UK, they need to go through a lockdown of 10 days. None of these world leaders went through any lockdowns. It's like one rule for us and another rule for them. They can do as much parties as they want, and they can meet up and do whatever they want. But if we do it, we get fined or we get put in jail. So this is how these idiots think, right? One minute they want to ask for China's help. Oh, can you please help us to get Russia to stop this war in Ukraine? But Chinese are like, I thought you said they're winning, so why do you want us to stop the war? Oh, we need you to stop the war anyway. If you can tell Russia to kind of stop. And the next sentence, we have human rights concerns with this. It's like them telling China what to do with one hand and slapping them with the other hand. It just doesn't make sense. The diplomacy has gone out the window these days. There's no diplomacy in the world anymore. Diplomacy could have stopped this war, stopped this conflict in Ukraine, or special operations in Ukraine. You could have stopped it easily if there was good diplomats around the world. This could have easily been avoided. There's no diplomacy around the world anymore, and this is why. So this is what China has says. The G7 has neither the right nor the qualifications to point fingers at China's internal affairs. We urge G7 members to manage their own country's affairs and solve their own human rights issues, and do something serious to restore the peace in Europe instead of smearing other countries, interfering in other countries' internal affairs, and making trouble everywhere. And you can see China's pretty much told them to shut the hell up. They need to look at their own economies and look at their own, cost of living crisis, inflation. And if you know the Chinese, they do not deal with threats like this. They do not like this kind of diplomacy. And you can see how they respect countries like Russia. Russia treats China with a lot of respect. They treat them as an equal. And America and the West doesn't treat China like that, even though China is the second largest economy and probably will be the number one economy in the next 10 years. This is basic diplomacy, and what I said about diplomacy is dead. This is not how you treat another superpower. China's economy is a very important economy, and every single country around the world you're not going to get along with. You'll find things that other countries do you might not like or you might not agree with. For example, Saudi Arabia, other Middle Eastern countries, some Asian countries, you might not like what they do. You might not like what India does. You might not like what Pakistan does. This is all about diplomacy and foreign influence. And diplomacy happens behind closed doors. You sit down with your other partner and you discuss issues. You discuss world issues, discuss trade, and you try and work out your differences behind closed doors. You don't go around to the world's press and say, China must do this, China must do that, China must do this. Think about it, guys. If I was watching television and my enemy comes up on television and he says, AJ must do this, AJ must do that, AJ's got human rights issues, AJ's got this, AJ's got that, how do you think I'm going to feel? Am I going to be happy? Obviously, I'm going to be really, really angry about it. I'd rather people sit down with me, tell me in front of my face, work things out, and that's diplomacy. I would respect them. Even though they might have differences with me, rather than going out and talking about it in the press and put it all over television, just to make a statement, just to kind of show the world, oh, you're a Chinese hater and blah, 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 let's go along with the narrative. Rather than that, wouldn't it be more respectful to kind of knock on my door, come in, have a coffee or two, sit down, work out our differences. That's what's missing around the world. People just don't seem to do that anymore. Diplomacy is pretty much dead. And I remember back in the day when, America had a great diplomats. They were traveling around the world and working out issues and working out problems with other countries. And Ronald Reagan was a great diplomat back in the day. Believe it or not, during the height of the Cold War, he never ever threatened Russia or he never said that, he would escalate anything. When he doesn't like something, he would call Russia and he says, listen, we need to talk. That's the kind of language he would use. Not like, oh yeah, you must do this, you must do that. We're gonna bomb you, we're gonna sanction you, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do. That's not the kind of language you use. So we have a new generation of people. We have these idiots like Blinken and Newland, and these are new generation of people who have no diplomacy skills whatsoever. And it's all over the world. You look at Boris, you got Liz Truss. You got people all over the world who have forgotten how to become good diplomats. The only couple of diplomats that actually really, really impress me is the leader for Jamaica. I think she's a great, great leader and a great diplomat. And I don't know if anyone knows her, but she's very, very well articulated. She speaks sense and things like that. People like that. We need more people like that around the world. And it's a shame, really. It's a shame. Anyway, let's continue. So there's this article as well. US is having trouble finding Asian countries willing to shoot missiles at China. So basically, what's happened is there's been a change in Philippines, and Philippines is a very pro-Western country over the years, and Philippines and America have lots of long ties going back to the Second World War and things like that. And recently, America has pretty much forgotten about Philippines over the years, and they have pretty much, when they did the war on terror, for example, they completely ignored Philippines. They completely ignored Asia. And they lost a lot of friends in Asia. And it wasn't until Obama came in and he says, all right, we're going to start pivoting to Asia. And he started focusing on Asian countries. And unfortunately, by then, most of the Asian countries already were having really, really good relationships with China. We're talking about Malaysia, Singapore, we're talking about Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. They have some great, great relationships with China. And the first island chain where America obviously has troops in South Korea, Japan. South Korea and Japan will always be by US's side because they've got about 50,000 American troops stationed in those countries. And those leaders are pretty much puppets of America. So they will always have America's back. And if they don't, they'll probably get blown out the sky by America or, other major sanctions. But they don't dare to go against America. America pretty much runs those puppet states. And another puppet state that used to be part of America was Philippines. And recently, Philippines has been going more friendly towards China. And the recent presidential election, you have a very, very pro-Chinese leader now. And he is now taking steps to basically join the Chinese and to kind of build up ties. There was an ASEAN meeting recently with Biden and many ASEAN leaders, and Joe Biden offered them 150 million as aid to ASEAN. I mean, can you believe that? It's like, it's like if you tip a waiter 1p or something, or if you tip a really, if you go to a really fancy restaurant and the waiter comes up to you and they've been doing a great job serving you all day, tirelessly working, and at the end of the day you give them 1p tip, 1p tip at the end of the day. How do you think that's going to make them feel? They're going to look at you like you're some sort of cheapskate. That's exactly how these ASEAN countries are feeling when Biden offers them 150 million. 150 million is not going to do anything around the world anymore. All of these ASEAN countries are always feeling insulted. America just can't do anything right. America went to Vietnam last year. You got Kamala Harris going to Vietnam and then visiting a war memorial of some guy who's been bombing the Vietnamese and killing the Vietnamese, absolutely insulting the Vietnamese. And then you have these cronies going into Singapore and asking Singapore to be anti-China when they don't even realize half of Singapore's population are Chinese. So it's stupid decisions like that in Asia that's actually pushing the Asian countries more further and further away from America. And now recently, the second island chain in the Solomon Islands have recently joined a security deal with China. And this is also causing more problems as well. Australia saying, no, you can't do that. America's saying, no, you can't do that. Even though Solomon Islands is a sovereign country, they can do whatever the hell they want. And this is the exact same argument that America puts to the Congress when they talk about Ukraine, and they say, oh, Ukraine is a sovereign country, they can join whichever organization they want. But when Solomon Island does the same thing, oh, no, you can't do that, this is not right, this is war, we're going to attack you. They go crazy, absolutely crazy. And the same thing happened with Cuba and Russia back in the day. So you see the hypocritical stuff that's going on in the West. And basically, I was leading up to this article here. US nuclear commander warns of deterrence crisis against Russia and China. So what this guy, head of US Strategic Command, which oversees the nuclear arsenal, warned Congress Wednesday Washington faced a heightened nuclear deterrent risk when it comes to Russia and China. So what he's trying to say is Russia's got about 7,000 nuclear missiles. Most of them are pointed towards America, and a lot of them are pointed towards Europe. And now China is building an arsenal as well. And China's not going to sit around having a few hundred, nuclear missiles while its enemies like America keeps threatening them. You have NATO threatening them. You have Europe threatening them. You have Japan and Korea threatening them. They have so many, enemies and American bases surrounding China. So they're not going to sit around with a few nuclear missiles. So China is building its new nuclear arsenal. And he's saying that over the past 2 years, China has doubled its nuclear stockpile within 2 years, despite expectations it would take Beijing until the end of decade to do so. And you got to look at how China is developing these missiles. They are using a process called 3D printing, and they're using 3D printing to speed up production of not only nuclear missiles, but anti-ship missiles and anti-airplane missiles, and ballistic missiles, submarine missiles. They are using 3D printing technology to do this. And you might say, 3D printing technology is a technology happening all over the world. America's got this, Europe has got this. Yeah, right. You're 100% right. But do they have the manufacturing capacity that China does? Do they have access to all sorts of raw materials, rare earth elements, all of that stuff, supply chains? No country around the world can compete with China's manufacturing and China's labor, China's access to rare earth minerals and supply chains and other things as well. And not only that, there's a limit when it comes to Russia and America when it comes to nuclear weapons. So they are not allowed to build any more nuclear weapons. They have that limit of around 6,000 to 7,000. China will eventually get to that number as well. So what this guy is saying is he's going to have 6,000 nuclear missiles pointing at America, and he's going to also have another 6,000 missiles possibly pointing at America coming from China as well. So that's 12,000 missiles, and America's only got 6,000 missiles. So can you work out the maths? So if America starts building more nuclear missiles, builds 12,000 for example, what do you think China and Russia are going to do? They're going to want the same number. So China will build 12,000, Russia will build 12,000, and that's 24,000. Can you work out the difference? No matter what America does now, it can't win. It will completely bankrupt itself trying to catch up with the nuclear arsenal of Russia and China. And not only that, Russia and China have hypersonic missiles. So they will get past any defense that America has put in place. So that's what this guy is saying, and he's basically facing a war that America can't lose. You know, America was powerful back in the day, 1950s, 60s. It was the first country which built up atomic weapons. They threw obviously 2 nuclear weapons at Japan. And back in those days, America was the most powerful country. No country could match it. No country could come near it. And things are different now. Things are different. America is on its way down. You know, countries like China, Russia are on its way up. And America can't go around dictating to the world anymore. They cannot be the police state of the world anymore. You know, and this is what this guy is saying. Not only is America losing its military might around the world, it's losing its nuclear deterrence as well. It's losing its economic might as well. You know, things are different now. And the world has changed. The world has changed a lot. Also, guys, Northern Ireland has reared its ugly head again. And those of you who don't know, Sinn Féin, which used to be very much a terrorist organisation, has won majority seats in Northern Ireland. And they said they're going to do a referendum over the next 5 to 10 years to reunite with Ireland. So that will probably be happening, or it's already happening behind the scenes. But I believe Scotland will probably be the first to leave UK, and then you will see Northern Ireland leaving as well. So Britain is basically looking at pissing off the Europeans again. Boris seems to think this is the perfect time to unilaterally leave some agreements, Brexit agreements, when it comes to Northern Ireland. They feel that some of these Brexit agreements with Northern Ireland are unfair, and Boris was threatening to unilaterally leave this agreement. The EU has said they will start a trade war with Britain if that's the case, and Britain looks like it's going to go ahead. I think that Boris thinks this is the best time to do it, while EU is basically occupied with Russia and all these other issues. Boris probably thinks this is the perfect time to do it, because the EU are not going to place sanctions on UK. They are too busy placing sanctions on themselves when it comes to Russia and all of these other stuff. And I believe Boris thinks he can get away with it. He might do, yeah. I mean, the people in the EU are pretty occupied with Russia. Yeah, I agree with him. However, it is a big risk to take. It is a major risk to take, and it's probably not worth taking at this point in time when Britain is really suffering, and you know, EU is suffering as well, but Britain is suffering even more, and I don't think it's a very good risk to take at all. And you can see from all of these papers, Rishi Sunak is not very popular at the moment. You can see he was the country's most popular politician. Now he is strongly negative territory. In a few months' time, he could be the most hated man in the country, as economic hardship really bites. So I don't want to tell you how bad the UK situation is. I mean, I just go to the supermarkets and there's hardly any food there. There is going to be a huge food shortage in England. People are not preparing themselves. I've already started preparing, buying dried food and long dated stuff like pasta and rice and wheat and flour, stuff that lasts a long time. I also bought myself another small fridge where I can put some stuff in there, and I suggest you guys do the same thing. There is going to be huge food shortage, not just in UK, but all over the world as well. And Britain is not doing well at all. There's still going to be another price hike when it comes to gas in October. I think people who are suffering right now will go over the edge around October time. People are suffering now. People can't afford to pay their rents. People can't afford to eat at the moment. Things are really bad in UK. It's a lot of doom and gloom, unfortunately. But the government put itself in this situation, I mean, you know, and a lot of people in UK, they are still, you know, not realizing what's happening in the world. They are still very, very in their own worlds or in their own bubbles. I just don't understand Britain. I just don't understand British people. I mean, they love going out to the pub. They love watching football. They love talking about football. But when it comes to real life politics and what's going on around the world, they just don't seem to care. But they will care when suddenly, they start losing their homes, their properties, they can't feed their kids. And what they're going to do? Well, it's going to be too late by then. I just want more people to take action in UK. There's not even one protest down the streets about the way the government is handling this situation. Not one. The only protest I see is about Russia and Ukraine. I don't see anybody protesting against the government about how it's dealing with all of this stuff. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I saw this article. Sturgeon's ally says Scotland should leave NATO as nuclear weapons don't keep us safe. So this is one of the best responses I've seen, by somebody in Europe or Scotland. Nobody in Europe. Why is nobody saying this in Europe? I completely agree with this. Scotland should leave NATO. They can see NATO as being an aggressive organization, and they're pushing for wars against Ukraine. They're pushing for wars now with Finland and Sweden, and they can see the whole world can see what an aggressive organization NATO is. And luckily, Scotland sees that as well. And I believe Scotland will leave UK at one point, and they will, forge their own path. And I think it will be the best for anyone to leave NATO, to be honest. France back in the day left NATO as well, and more countries need to have the balls, to leave this terrorist organization. This is a offensive organization, and they say it's all for defensive purposes. NATO was involved in Iraq. NATO was involved bombing Libya, and look at Libya now, an absolutely third world country. Libya was one of the richest countries in Africa. It's one of the most, people were really enjoying their lives in Libya, and they had to completely destroy that country, absolutely destroyed that country. And then they bombed Yugoslavia to smithereens, destroyed that country as well. It doesn't even exist anymore. And NATO was involved in Iraq, in Afghanistan. NATO was involved everywhere. Everywhere that America pushes wars, they bring NATO with it. NATO is just a puppet. NATO is another name for America. Whatever America wants, NATO does. People need to forget, if you're a NATO member, you're basically an American puppet. And you're basically following American foreign policy. If America wants war with China, they'll take NATO with you. If America wants war with Russia, they'll take NATO with you. You don't have any say. You talk about, if you say NATO is a defensive organization, it's not. And if America wants a war with China, they'll take NATO with you, because most of NATO is America. Most of NATO's weapons are American. It's run by Americans. So they have a bigger army than America's army and NATO's army as well. And guess what? They're going to put NATO in the front lines. They're not going to ruin American lives. They're going to ruin Ukrainian lives. They're going to ruin European lives. They'll put all of the NATO troops at the front line, make sure they die first, and Americans will be from the back, throwing missiles here and there, doing long-range bombing. That's what they're good at. And that's what they're going to do. People in NATO and these countries which are in NATO, the best thing for them is to leave NATO. Anyway, that's all I have time for today, guys. Let me know what you guys think, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do what you can to help with the algorithm. And also, if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee or you can join my Patreon. And I love reading your comments as well. Make sure you put comments in the video, not only for me but for others as well to read. So yeah, that's all for today. So I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.